Hey mini enthusiasts, how you doing? Welcome back to part 10 of the ERA build. I can't believe we're on part 10 already. So you pick us up from where we left off last time, where Mark was mocking up the front end. Not fully welded in place yet, just held on with mole grips just to make sure everything lined up. And now he's doing the same as I did on Project Sprout, which is just to put a few spot welds in either side, just to hold the wings in place, just in case it needs adjusting later on. It is quite easy just to obviously unpick a couple of spot welds as opposed to unpicking them all. So front panel off again, and that's so Mark can clean up the mating surfaces between the two panels. So the two panels will be spot welded together, and just the same as MIG welding, in fact not just the same, with spot welding, the two metal surfaces making contact with each other have to have absolutely perfect contact. Clean metal, like I mentioned when you're MIG welding, the cleaner the metal, the better the preparation, the better the weld. But with spot welding, you cannot spot weld onto dirty metal. It requires or relies on electrical conductance between the two pieces of metal. So where the prongs of the spot welder meet and press the metal together, you're passing electrical current through those panels, and that creates or generates a huge amount of heat. It's a high amount of current, so it generates heat very quickly, and that heat causes the metal in that localized area to fuse together. So it needs electrical conductance. So if you've not got electrical conductance there, the spot welder just doesn't work. Or if you've got poor conductance, you get a load of sparks coming out the spot welder. And as you can see, Mark's just sprayed some primer on those mating surfaces. Now what you need to do with especially with a spot welder is you need to have conductive primer. So you've got to have primer which conducts electricity, because if it doesn't, obviously it won't generate the weld. So we use a zinc based primer which has got a high concentration of zinc in it. Zinc conducts electricity and allows you still to be able to spot weld the panel, but you do get copper based weld through primers as well. I'm not sure if there's any advantage one over the other, what the pros and cons on are. I've always used zinc based U-pole weld through primer, but I do see some people using copper based primer. So I don't know what the difference is, apart from obviously the material. But if anyone does know, please drop a something in the description down the bottom. I'd like to know myself. So that's, as I mentioned in a previous episode, that's Project Sprout subframe there. So Mark's subframes are away being powder coated, so I had Sprout subframe out, so I dropped that down to Mark, so Mark can use it just to help line up the front end. And a couple of the people have commented now asking about the way we line up the front end. So as you can see here, we get all the front end on and sort of tacked into place, and then put the subframe up in just to make sure everything fits. And the reason we do it that way, as opposed to fitting the subframe first and then fitting the panels around it, is that you can there is some adjustment on the subframe between the subframe and the front panel where the teardrop bushes go. So from new, not all minis have them, but they use shims. So they use shims to adjust the gap between the front panel and the subframe. And there is a bit of movement in the rear mounts as well, which basically tilts the subframe up and down. So doing it that way, there is actually a bit of adjustment there, whereas I think if you put the subframe in first and bolt the front panel to the subframe and then try fitting the wings, you've got no adjustment there really, because yeah, or I don't think you have anyway. You can't really adjust the gaps between the scuttle panel and the wings. It just seems very fixed doing it that way. I don't know, I guess it's horses for courses. I'm sure people have done it both ways, but this is the best, most efficient way Mark and I have found of doing it. Like I say, what it allows you to do actually is get all your panel gaps perfect. Get all your panel gaps perfect, get the front end looking right, and then if there's any adjustment to be made, you can do that with shims on the front panel. So that little trolley table Mark's got there is really useful. So the back end at the moment is on the rollover jig, the front end is on the table, and that allows him to take the jig out the front so you can access the front for putting the front on, and in a moment we're going to prep the bulkhead box to weld on. When he first lowered it onto that table, I thought it'd fallen off for a moment. Did you? It did seem to go down very fast. Mark's looking pretty happy with himself. I'm assuming it all lined up roughly okay. He did say he had to fettle around with it a bit. This is actually the third time I've narrated this. I've done it twice before and the sound mucked up for some reason. I sounded like a Dalek. So yeah, I've seen this video a few times now. What it means is I'd have spent a whole hour narrating, repeating the same thing, and interestingly I never say the same thing over and over again. So I never rehearse these, I just watch them through and narrate them as we go along. Most of it I do from memory, but there are bits where Mark's working on his own where I'm not there, where I can't see what's been done, so I'm seeing it first time, same as you guys. So obviously I've joined Mark now. I'm working on the back of the car, just finishing off the rear sill section where it joins to the rear heel board there. So most of the welding is done on the floor, so just a little bit to finish off on the back there. And as you'd notice in all of the videos, it's predominantly me that does the welding. Mark does bits and bobs now and again, and it's Mark that does all the prep work. And the reason for that is just efficiency really. I've been welding for ever since I've owned minis, which is a long time, so 25 plus years. It's 20, yeah, a long time anyway. So I've had plenty of experience at welding. Can't say I'm no expert at it, but I think I'm reasonable at welding now. I can do a good enough job, and I've learned just from experience. And obviously Mark's pretty new to this, but just being in the trade, he is a carpenter. He's very good at sort of cutting things out, measuring things up, making things the right shape. You know, he's very good with metal work. So we just work that way just because it's the most efficient way of working. And it's actually quite nice for me sometimes when Mark's done all the prep work and the panels lined up, in, clamped, primed, ready to go, and all I've got to do is turn up and lay some welds down. It's quite satisfying. It's quite nice when you're in the ideal welding position. You've got the welder dialed in nicely and everything's prepared and ready to go for you. So at this point, if you're enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up. It does help, appreciate it. And also, if you're not a subscriber, I would thoroughly recommend subscribing. I've got over 250 videos on the channel now, and there's always new content coming. And for the last couple of weeks I think we've been doing a daily upload, but that might slow down a little bit now I'm back at work, so I just don't get the time at home to be able to do the editing and the filming and the work. But over Christmas obviously it allowed us to get really ahead with both builds, Project Sprout and the ERA. Also just picking up on a couple of comments about PPE and posture and looking after ourselves. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you guys when you say that. Quite often I'll be working away, I'll forget to put on a dust mask, I forget to put on goggles, I watch it back in the video and think, oh, that was a bit dodgy. But yeah, it's common sense really. You need to look after yourself. I nag Mark quite a bit. You'll always see me, I always kneel on the kneeling mat, just because I've had problems with my knees in the past. Kneeling on damp concrete floors and things like that doesn't do your knees any good. I think the doctor actually called it housemaid's knee, which wasn't very flattering when I had to go into work and say I've got housemaid's knee. Yeah, it didn't sound very impressive, did it? But it is a thing. And I don't know, Mark does so well with it because I see him kneeling down in all sorts of different positions, and he doesn't seem to suffer with his back. I should imagine he must do. He's 6 foot plus, so like me, tall people are not very good for bending down and getting in small places. But he's quite a fit and active person, Mark, more than me. So, as I was mentioning earlier about Mark doing the prep, so Mark has made the bulkhead box there. It's been cut down from a mini spares one for a turbo mini. So the ERA turbo engine is out of a Metro turbo 1275cc with a Garrett, I think it's a T3 turbo on the back of it. It does not fit in a Mini. So on a standard Mini, that engine doesn't fit. What you need to do is make some clearance at the back of the engine in the bulkhead area of about an additional 1.5 to 2 inches to allow that Garrett T3 turbo to fit in the engine bay. It's actually quite a big turbo for a 1300cc engine, that is. It's bigger than it needs. But yeah, without making modifications to the bulkhead, you cannot fit it in. Now, there are some kits you can get. There are different inlet and exhaust manifolds that you can get now that do allow fitment without chopping up the bulkhead or making additional space in the bulkhead. Not sure if they were available in the late 80s when they developed and built the ERA. I suspect they might have been, but Rover's brief to ERA when they built the cars, that was the vast majority of parts and spares and everything for the car had to come from the Rover parts bin, had to be parts available from existing stock, and that was really just to ensure that they could continue to warranty the cars after they were built. So if they made something bespoke and it went wrong, then it would be very costly for them to have parts made specially. So things like exhaust and inlet manifolds, which would have broken, would have potentially been warranty items, they would have wanted to keep standard items. The actual bulkhead box, yeah, you're not going to be replacing a bulkhead under warranty. Well, I wouldn't have thought so anyway, and it's not really a wear and tear item. So that was one of the areas where they had something made specially, or they made a box specially to go into the bulkhead. And like I say, it doesn't give a huge amount of extra clearance. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches. As you can see there, Mark's got the driver's door out again. This is the third time it's going on the car now, just so Mark can fit the A panel in place and make sure it's all lined up properly. So it's always worth checking door fitment because it is quite hard to get right, and if you've welded everything in place, then there is a bit of adjustment on the door, but if the hole is not big enough for the door to go in, there ain't a great deal you can do about that. So the A panel actually has quite a bit of adjustment on it, and one of the subscribers actually pointed out to me when I was doing the A panels on Sprout recently, I videoed doing one side, and there's quite a lot of adjustment. So you've got up and down adjustment on the A panel, you can adjust it in and out, and you can adjust it backwards and forwards as well. And with a new flitch panel on there, or hinge panel, you might find that there's not enough door gap there, so the A panel needs to come forward a little bit more. But what you can actually do, and it's quite standard practice, and that is to trim a little bit off the inner flitch panel, the hinge panel where it joins to the A panel, and that's exactly what I had to do on the near side front of Sprout. It was a new flitch panel on there, the A panel fitted, but then the door gap wasn't big enough, and I had to just go down there with a cutting tool and take off. It was only about 2mm, but it was enough to get their gaps right. And there's me just welding that bulkhead in place now. That was actually a really nice bit to weld. So like I've said before about welding, you know, preparation is the most important thing. You can't weld good metal to rust. It's much better if you're welding good metal to good metal of the same thickness. So preparation, getting the welder settings right, and then third is probably posture when you're welding. So you'll see me sometimes and I'm welding upside down at a funny angle, head tilted, the light's not good, and I'm welding with the trigger in my left hand. That's probably worst case scenario. This sort of welding where it's almost sort of eye line or head height, good position, you can get the torch in a good position, there's plenty of room around you. You can lay down some really nice welds, and I did do on the bulkhead. They come out, it looked like a load of dimes, as the Americans said, laying on top of each other, and it's quite satisfying when you get a good weld like that. But as you know, it's not always as simple as that, is it? So I think the next episode, episode 11, brings us pretty much to the end of all the panel work, or as we thought anyway. We found a bit of a surprise on the back, but I'll talk to you about that next time. So thanks for watching. Right, there's the turbo bulkhead done. So we've adapted this bulkhead plate from one they supply from either Mini Spares or Mini Sports. Mini Spares. The one that comes from Mini Spares is about another 5 inches wider for some reason. So we narrowed it down and tried to get it as close as we can to the original ERA bulkhead. That's looking pretty close, to be honest. And there's the original bulkhead there.